The first shot missed Killian Tate by mere inches, sending splinters of wood flying as the bullet embedded itself in the saloon wall behind her. It was 1878 in Redemption Creek, Arizona territory, a place where the scorching sun showed no mercy, and apparently neither did the men who had come for her brother. Killian dropped to the floor, her heart pounding against her ribs as she crawled toward Andrew, who lay bleeding from a wound in his shoulder. The dusty floorboards scraped against her palms as another shot rang out, followed by the sound of breaking glass. The few patrons still inside scattered like startled birds, diving for cover or rushing toward the back exit. "Andy," she whispered urgently, reaching her brother, who was slumped against the bar, his face pale beneath the dirt and stubble. At 23, he was only 2 years her junior, but right now he looked like a frightened boy. "We need to move." "Can't," he rasped, his breathing labored. "They found me, Killy. Told you I was in too deep." Outside, a man's voice called out, "Tate, send your sister home and face us like a man. You stole from the wrong people." Killian's mind raced. Her brother had returned 3 days ago, riding hard into their small ranch outside of town, with a saddlebag full of money and fear in his eyes. He'd sworn he'd won it in a poker game, but she knew better. Andy had always been a terrible liar, especially to her. "I didn't know they were Colton's men," Andrew whispered, wincing as he shifted. "The money was just sitting there, and I thought—" "Save your breath," Killian interrupted, tearing a strip from her petticoat to press against his wound. Colton was a name that inspired fear throughout the territory, a wealthy cattle baron with a reputation for brutal retribution against those who crossed him. The sound of spurs jingling against wooden planks made her freeze. Someone was entering the saloon, walking with the unhurried confidence of a man who had all the time in the world. Killian peered around the edge of the bar and saw him tall, broad-shouldered, dressed in dark clothing, with a long duster coat that had seen better days. His face was partially obscured by the shadow cast by his hat, but she could make out a strong jawline covered in several days' worth of beard. "I count 2 men outside, plus the fellow who just walked in," the bartender whispered, crouching low behind the bar with them. "Back door's still clear if you want to make a run for it." Andrew groaned, his eyelids fluttering. "I can't run anywhere." The stranger's boots stopped just a few feet away from their hiding place. "I know you're behind that bar, Tate," he called, his voice deep and steady. "And I know you're bleeding." Killian squeezed her brother's hand, then slowly rose to her feet, keeping her hands visible. The man before her stood with a relaxed posture, but she recognized the coiled readiness in his stance like a mountain lion, appearing lazy until the moment it pounced. "My brother needs a doctor," she said, lifting her chin. "He's losing blood." The stranger studied her with piercing blue eyes. "That tends to happen when you steal from men like Colton Davis." "Please," Killian said, hating the tremor in her voice. "He made a mistake." "A $5,000 mistake," the man replied, his expression unreadable. "That's a costly error." The batwing doors of the saloon creaked open, and one of Colton's men stepped inside, rifle in hand. "Anything in there, Archer?" The man Archer didn't turn around. "Situation's under control, Beck. Wait outside." "Boss wants this wrapped up quick," Beck insisted, taking another step forward. Archer's hand moved to rest on his holstered pistol. "I said wait outside." Something in his tone made the other man hesitate before backing away, the doors swinging shut behind him. Killian felt a surge of desperate hope. "You're not with them?" "Let's just say I have my own interest in this situation." Archer moved closer to the bar, peering over to look at Andrew. "He won't make it to sundown without proper care." Andrew's breathing had grown more labored, his skin taking on a grayish tinge. Killian fought back tears. "There's a doctor in town. If we could just—" "Colton's men have this place surrounded," Archer interrupted. "They're not known for their patience or mercy." "Then why are you here?" she challenged. "If not to collect for Colton, then what?" A ghost of a smile crossed Archer's face. "Colton Davis and I have unfinished business. Let's leave it at that." The sound of horses approaching outside drew their attention. More men were arriving, and time was running out. "My horse is tied up behind the apothecary," Archer said, his decision seemingly made in that moment. "If we move now, we might have a chance." "We?" Killian repeated, hope and suspicion warring within her. Unless you'd prefer to stay and explain to Colton's men why they should forgive your brother's debt. Outside, a voice called out, "Archer Ironside, we know you're in there. The boss wants a word." Archer's expression hardened. "Seems they know I'm here. Decision time, Miss Tate." Killian looked down at her brother, who was slipping in and out of consciousness. "Save him first," she pleaded, her voice breaking. "Whatever happens to me doesn't matter." Archer's gaze locked with hers, something fierce and determined flashing in his eyes. "You both leave here breathing, or neither do," he stated with finality. "Those are the only terms I offer." Before she could respond, he was moving, crouching beside Andrew and checking his pulse. "He's still with us, but barely. Help me get him up." Together they lifted Andrew, who groaned in pain but managed to stand with their support. Archer guided them toward the back of the saloon, moving with purposeful haste. "Why would you help us?" Killian asked as they reached the rear exit. "Questions later," Archer replied, drawing his pistol with his free hand. "When I open this door, we move fast and low. My horse is strong enough to carry two. You'll ride with your brother while I provide cover. And then what?" His eyes met hers again, and for a moment, something unspoken passed between them. "And then, we outrun them." The next few minutes passed in a blur of gunfire and dust. Archer's horse, a magnificent black stallion, carried Killian and Andrew, while Archer commandeered a sorrel from the hitching post. They thundered out of town, with bullets whizzing past them, Archer returning fire with precision that spoke of years of experience. By the time they reached the foothills several miles outside of town, Andrew was unconscious, slumped against Killian's chest as she desperately tried to keep pressure on his wound. "There's a cabin," Archer called over, pointing to a ridge ahead. "Used by trappers in winter. Should be empty now." The cabin was little more than a single room, with a stone fireplace and sparse furnishings, but it offered sanctuary as the sun began its descent. Archer worked quickly, clearing a table where they laid Andrew down. "I need clean water, whatever liquor you can find, and those bandages in my saddlebag," he instructed, removing his duster and rolling up his sleeves. Killian moved with frantic efficiency, gathering the supplies while watching Archer examine her brother's wound with experienced hands. "You know what you're doing," she observed. 4 years with the 7th Cavalry teaches a man a thing or two about bullet wounds," he replied, not looking up from his work. "This isn't my first time patching someone up." For the next hour, Archer worked to extract the bullet and clean the wound, his focus unwavering as Killian assisted as best she could. When it was finally done, Andrew lay breathing more steadily, though he remained unconscious. "He's young and strong," Archer said, washing blood from his hands in a basin. "If infection doesn't set in, he should recover." Killian collapsed into a chair, the events of the day finally catching up with her. "Thank you," she whispered, tears threatening to spill. "I don't understand why you'd risk your life for strangers, but thank you." Archer dried his hands on a relatively clean cloth, his expression thoughtful. "Colton Davis had my brother killed 3 years ago, over a water rights dispute." His voice was level, but Killian could hear the underlying current of rage. "I couldn't save Thomas then. Maybe I can balance the scales a little by saving your brother now." "I'm sorry about Thomas," she said softly. "So am I." Archer moved to the cabin's single window, peering out at the darkening landscape. "We should be safe here tonight, but come morning, we'll need to move. Colton's men are persistent." "Where can we go? They know our ranch." Archer turned to face her. "I have a place north of here, near the Mogollon Rim, remote enough that Colton's influence doesn't reach." "And you'd take us there? 2 people you just met?" A hint of a smile touched his lips. "Let's just say I have a vested interest in causing Colton Davis as much frustration as possible." As night fell fully, they settled into an uneasy vigilance. Archer insisted Killian get some rest while he kept watch, but sleep evaded her. Instead, she found herself studying him as he sat by the window, his profile illuminated by the soft glow of the fire. There was something compelling about him, not just his willingness to help them, but the quiet strength he exuded. "You should rest," he said without turning, somehow sensing her gaze. "I keep thinking they'll find us," she admitted. "If they do, we'll hear them coming." He glanced at her then. "Your brother made a dangerous enemy in Colton." Killian sighed. "Andy always believed in shortcuts. After our parents died in that influenza outbreak 2 years ago, the ranch started failing. He wanted to save it, to make things right. By stealing? By whatever means necessary, she corrected. I'm not excusing what he did, but I understand it. Our parents built that ranch from nothing. Archer nodded slowly. Sometimes the things we do to protect what we love lead us down paths we never intended to travel. Something in his tone made Killian wonder about his own path. How long have you been tracking Colton? Since Thomas died, nearly got him once, up near Flagstaff. Then again, outside of Tucson. His expression hardened. Man surrounds himself with guns for hire. Is that why you were in Redemption Creek, looking for Colton? I heard rumors he was heading there to deal with a theft personally. Figured it might be my chance. Archer's gaze shifted to Andrew's sleeping form. Didn't expect to be riding out with two Tates in tow. Life has a way of surprising us, Killian said softly. The ghost of a smile appeared on Archer's face. That it does, Miss Tate. That it does. Dawn broke with no sign of pursuit, but Archer remained cautious. Andrew had developed a fever during the night, but by morning it had broken, and he was lucid enough to understand their situation. I really stepped in it this time, didn't I? He said weakly as Killian helped him drink some water. Up to your neck, she confirmed, relief evident in her voice. Mr. Ironside here saved your life. Andrew's gaze shifted to Archer, who was preparing the horses for travel. Why would you do that? You don't know us. Let's just say I understand the desire to strike back at Colton Davis, Archer replied, securing a bedroll to his saddle. Can you ride? Andrew grimaced. If the alternative is staying here to be found by Colton's men, then yes. It took considerable effort to get Andrew mounted, but by mid-morning they were traveling north, keeping to less traveled paths and wooded areas where possible. Archer led them with confident familiarity of the terrain, occasionally doubling back or taking unexpected turns to confuse any potential pursuit. As they rode, Killian found herself drawn to their mysterious savior. There was a depth to him that intrigued her, a combination of hardness and compassion that she hadn't encountered before. When their eyes met, something unspoken passed between them, a recognition perhaps, of kindred spirits who understood loss and resilience. By late afternoon, Andrew's strength was failing, his face pale and drawn with pain, despite his attempts to hide it. We need to stop, Killian called to Archer, who nodded in agreement. They made camp beside a small stream, sheltered by a cluster of cottonwood trees. While Archer secured the perimeter, Killian tended to her brother's wound, relieved to find it showed no signs of infection. He likes you, Andrew murmured as she changed his bandage. What are you talking about? Ironside. He watches you when you're not looking. A weak smile crossed Andrew's face. Can't say I blame him. You've always been the strong one. Save your energy for healing, she chided gently, though she couldn't help glancing toward Archer, who was returning from scouting the area. No sign of pursuit, he reported, crouching down to build a small, nearly smokeless fire. But we should keep moving at first light. As night fell, they shared a simple meal of jerky and biscuits from Archer's provisions. Andrew fell asleep almost immediately after eating, exhaustion claiming him. How much further to your place? Killian asked, wrapping a blanket around her shoulders against the evening chill. Another day's ride, Archer replied, adding a small branch to the fire. It's not much a cabin and some fenced land, but it's defensible and off the main trails. Killian nodded, studying the flames. And after that? Once Andy is healed? Archer was quiet for a moment, his expression thoughtful. That depends on how determined Colton is to make an example of your brother, and how attached you are to your ranch. It was our parents' dream, she said softly. But dreams can change when survival is at stake. Their eyes met across the fire, and Killian felt an unexpected flutter in her chest at the intensity in his gaze. Sometimes new dreams can be built, he said, his voice low, from the ashes of old ones. The journey to Archer's homestead took longer than anticipated, as they needed to stop frequently for Andrew's sake. By the time the cabin came into view, nestled against a backdrop of ponderosa pines with the dramatic rim formations visible in the distance, Killian felt as though weeks rather than days had passed since their escape from Redemption Creek. The cabin was larger than she expected, solidly built with a corral for horses and even a small barn. A creek wound its way nearby, providing water and the soothing sound of flowing current that reminded Killian of happier days at their own ranch. "It's beautiful," she remarked, as Archer helped Andrew down from his horse. "It serves its purpose," he replied, though she caught a hint of pride in his voice. "Let's get your brother inside and settled." The interior was simple but comfortable. One large room with a stone fireplace, a separate bedroom, and a kitchen area with a cast-iron stove. Everything was meticulously maintained, with none of the bachelor's disarray Killian might have expected. As days turned into weeks, a routine developed. Archer would rise before dawn to tend to the horses and check the perimeter of his property, a habit from his cavalry days that he couldn't break. Killian would prepare meals and tend to Andrew, whose recovery was steady but slow. In the afternoons, when Andrew rested, she would join Archer in whatever task he was undertaking, repairing fences, tending to a small vegetable garden, or caring for the animals. They spoke often during these shared tasks, and Killian learned more about the man who had saved them. Archer had grown up in Missouri, the son of a blacksmith who had taught him the trade before he joined the cavalry at 18. After his discharge, he and Thomas had started a freight business that had been moderately successful until a dispute over water rights brought them into conflict with Colton Davis. The murder of his brother had set Archer on a path of revenge that had consumed him for the past 3 years. "Does it ever get easier?" Killian asked one evening as they sat on the cabin's porch, watching the sunset paint the rim in shades of orange and gold. "The loss, I mean." Archer was quiet for a long moment before answering. "No, but you learn to carry it differently. At first, it's like trying to hold on to something that's burning you, but you can't let go. Eventually, you find a way to hold it without being consumed by the flames." "That's a good way to put it," she agreed, thinking of her parents. "I still expect to see them sometimes, waiting at the ranch house when we return." "Will you go back when Andrew is fully recovered?" Killian considered the question. "I don't know. Part of me wants to, but I'm not sure it would ever feel safe again. Not with Colton still out there." "He won't stop looking," Archer said, his voice grave. "Men like him can't abide being defied." Their eyes met, and Killian felt that same flutter in her chest that had become increasingly familiar over the past weeks. There was something between them now, unspoken but undeniable. "Then what do we do?" she asked softly. Archer's hand moved to cover hers on the porch railing, his touch sending warmth through her. "We face it. Together." It was the first time he had indicated that their arrangement might be more than temporary, and Killian found herself hoping it would be true. As Andrew regained his strength, he began to help around the homestead as well, though his contribution was limited by his still healing wound. Killian noticed a change in her brother, a newfound seriousness and sense of responsibility that had been absent before. "I've been thinking," Andrew said one morning as they collected eggs from the small chicken coop Archer maintained, "about what happens next." "And," Killian prompted, placing another egg carefully in her basket, "I can't run forever, Killy. Sooner or later, I need to face what I did." "You can't be serious," she protested. "Colton would kill you without hesitation." Andrew shook his head. "Maybe there's another way. The money is still hidden where I stashed it before coming home. If I could return it, with interest." "It's not about the money for him anymore," Killian argued. "It's about making an example of you. Still, I have to try something. I can't let you and Archer live under this cloud because of my mistake." The mention of Archer's name made Killian pause. She hadn't admitted to herself, let alone to Andrew, how important the quiet, determined man had become to her in such a short time. "He cares for you, you know," Andrew said, reading her thoughts with the intuition of a sibling. "I see how he looks at you when he thinks no one is watching." Killian busied herself with the eggs, trying to hide the blush that crept into her cheeks. "We've barely known him a month." "Sometimes a month is all it takes," Andrew replied with a small smile, "especially when those weeks are spent wondering if each day might be your last." That evening, as Archer returned from checking his traps, Killian watched him approach with new awareness. The sun was setting behind him, casting his tall figure in silhouette against the golden sky. There was a quiet strength about him that she had come to rely on, and the thought of losing him, created an ache in her chest. "Something on your mind?" Archer asked as he reached the porch where she waited. Andrew thinks he should return the money to Colton, she said without preamble. He believes it might resolve things. Archer's expression turned grim. It won't. Colton Davis doesn't forgive. That's what I told him, but he's determined to do something. He feels responsible for putting us in danger. As he should, Archer replied, then softened his tone at her expression. I don't mean that harshly. Taking responsibility is the mark of a man growing into himself, but returning the money won't be enough. Then what will be? Killian asked, frustration evident in her voice. We can't live like this forever, looking over our shoulders, waiting for Colton's men to find us. Archer was quiet for a moment, his gaze distant as he considered her words. No, we can't, he finally agreed. There may be a way, though it's risky. Tell me, she urged. Colton's been operating outside the law for years, not just the murder of Thomas, but numerous other acts that would see him hang if brought to light. The territorial marshal in Prescott has been building a case against him, but witnesses have a way of disappearing. Archer's eyes met hers. Your brother's testimony about Colton's men attempting to kill him over a theft could be valuable. You want Andy to testify against Colton? Killian asked incredulously. That would be painting an even bigger target on his back. Not if Colton is behind bars awaiting trial, Archer countered. I've been collecting evidence myself. But it's not enough. With your brother's testimony and the money as proof, it's still incredibly dangerous, she protested. Archer stepped closer, taking her hands in his. Killian, I've been running in circles chasing vengeance for 3 years. It's gotten me nowhere, except further from the man Thomas would have wanted me to be. His grip tightened slightly. There comes a point when you have to stop running and make a stand, or you'll never truly live again. The sincerity in his voice touched something deep within her. And is that what you want? To live again? His expression softened, and one hand released hers to gently touch her cheek. I didn't think I did, until recently. The kiss that followed was gentle at first, a tentative exploration that quickly deepened as Killian responded, her arms sliding around his neck as his encircled her waist. When they finally broke apart, both slightly breathless, Archer rested his forehead against hers. I never expected you, he murmured. When I rode into Redemption Creek, I was looking for a way to end something, not begin it. Killian smiled, her heart full. Life has a way of surprising us. The plan they formulated was dangerous, but offered their best chance at freedom. Archer would travel to Prescott to speak with Marshal Jensen, who had been pursuing Colton for years. Meanwhile, Andrew would retrieve the hidden money, and Killian would prepare the homestead in case they needed to defend it. 3 days, Archer said as he prepared to leave, dawn barely breaking over the eastern horizon. If I'm not back in 3 days, take the horses and head north toward the Colorado Territory. I have a friend in Denver who will help you. Killian nodded, though the thought of leaving without him created a physical pain in her chest. We'll be here, she promised. Be careful. He kissed her one more time, a gesture that felt both like a promise and a potential goodbye. Always am. The 2 days that followed were the longest of Killian's life. Andrew returned successfully with the money, and together they prepared the cabin, as Archer had instructed, stockpiling water, positioning rifles at key windows, and keeping the horses saddled and ready in case they needed to flee quickly. On the 3rd day, as the sun began its descent, Killian paced the porch, her eyes constantly scanning the trail that led to the homestead. When she finally saw riders approaching, her heart nearly stopped. There were several of them, not just Archer alone. Andy, she called urgently. Someone's coming, more than one. Andrew joined her, rifle in hand, his expression tense. I count 5 riders. Can you see if Archer is with them? Killian squinted against the setting sun, then felt a wave of relief wash over her. He's there, leading them. And that one in the black coat, I think it's a marshal's duster. As the riders drew closer, she could make out Archer's face, looking tired but triumphant. Beside him rode a stern-looking man with a silver star pinned to his chest. Marshal Jensen, she presumed, and 3 deputies, all heavily armed. Miss Tate, the marshal called as they dismounted in front of the cabin. Your brother inside? He is, she confirmed, her eyes seeking Archer's for reassurance. Archer nodded slightly, moving to stand beside her. It's all right, he said quietly. Jensen has been after Colton for years. With the money as evidence and Andrew's testimony, they're ready to make an arrest. Colton and his men were in Prescott when I arrived, Archer explained as they moved inside. Jensen already had men watching them. When I showed him the evidence I'd gathered and explained about Andrew, he decided it was time to move. Andrew stepped forward, looking more like the man their father had raised than the boy who had fled with stolen money. I'm ready to make a statement, Marshal, and return what I took, with whatever consequences that brings. The Marshal's stern expression softened slightly. The return of the money will certainly help your case, son, as will your willingness to testify. Colton Davis has terrorized this territory for too long. For the next hour, Andrew recounted everything: the theft, the pursuit, the attempted murder in the saloon. When he finished, Marshal Jensen nodded gravely. We'll ride for Prescott at first light, he decided. Davis won't expect us to move so quickly, and Surprise is our ally here. We'll be ready, Archer said, his hand finding Killian's. All of us, she added firmly. The Marshal looked between them, something knowing in his gaze. Very well, my men will take watch tonight. You folks should rest while you can. As the others settled in for the night, Archer led Killian outside to the porch where the stars were beginning to appear in the darkening sky. Are you sure about this? He asked, his voice low. Going to Prescott means facing Colton directly. It will be dangerous. Killian squeezed his hand. I'm sure about you, she replied simply. The rest we'll face together, as you said. Archer's expression softened as he pulled her close. When all this is over, he murmured against her hair, I want you to stay, not because you have nowhere else to go, but because you choose to be here, with me. Killian leaned back to look into his eyes, seeing the future she wanted reflected there. I already made that choice the moment you said we'd both leave that saloon breathing. His smile was slow and warm. Is that a yes, Killian Tate? Yes, she whispered, standing on tiptoe to kiss him beneath the vast Arizona sky. That's a yes for as long as we both shall live. The trial of Colton Davis became the sensation of the Arizona territory in the summer of 1878. With Andrew's testimony, Archer's evidence, and the accounts of numerous other victims who finally found the courage to come forward, the cattle baron was sentenced to hang for his crimes. His network of influence crumbled, and for the first time in years, people spoke his name without fear. Archer and Killian were married that autumn, with Marshal Jensen officiating and Andrew standing proudly as witness. The homestead that had once been Archer's solitary refuge became a place of new beginnings and shared dreams. Andrew eventually returned to the Tate Ranch, determined to restore it to what their parents had envisioned. He visited often, always welcome at the table of the sister who had never given up on him and the man who had given them both a second chance. On cool evenings, Archer and Killian would sit on their porch, watching the sunset paint the Mogollon rim in brilliant colors, their hands intertwined as they spoke of the future. Do you ever think about that day in the saloon? Killian asked once, her head resting on his shoulder. How differently things might have turned out if you hadn't been there. Archer was quiet for a moment before answering. I think I was always meant to be there, he said finally. Just as you were always meant to be here, with me. Killian smiled, thinking of the desperate woman who had pleaded, save him first, and the determined man who had refused to leave either of them behind. You both leave here breathing, or neither do, she quoted softly. You kept your promise. And I always will, he assured her, sealing the vow with a kiss as the first stars appeared in the twilight sky above their home.